Hi, my name is Jessica, and it feels really awkward to introduce yourself to a phone, but I'm going to try and get past the awkwardness of this for me and be really vulnerable and share our story and share our life and what it has looked like over the last 8 months. Um, I have pushed the P around the plate and hitting the record button for probably far too long, especially because this is something that God has laid on my heart to do, and I feel like I need to follow through in obedience by doing it. Because I don't know why He told me to do it, and I may never know why, but here I am. So I've let fear of being vulnerable or fear of being judged or whatever, and then also just procrastination get in the way of hitting the start button. And I don't want to do that anymore. I think at some point you just have to overcome those fears and do something even when it's uncomfortable. So here we are. I think it's also important that I say that it's not my story to tell. I'm telling Ruby's story because she doesn't yet have a voice. But as her mom and her dad, maybe at some point he'll join in with us. Though I'm sure as uncomfortable as this is for me, it's probably 4 times more uncomfortable for him. So we'll see. But I think it's important that we share it for her. I think, I don't know what I hope to come out of this. One thing that, possibly is just that our friends and family would know on a deeper level what we've been through. Every step along the way, every emotion, however raw it may be, because I think so many of you see the Facebook posts, and having you guys support us and follow along with us in those ways is huge. But that's a very edited version of what this has looked like for us. And then so two, it really is a hope of mine that our story may provide hope to another family or person who finds themselves in a difficult season, that they can find the hope in it through Ruby. Perhaps all of this is just to be a sounding board and for me to get some things off my chest, and that's okay too. I should probably be speaking to somebody on a regular basis about all of the trauma that we've been through. But if you are a parent, much less a parent to a child with any sort of medical need, then you understand what it means to just be in survival mode, which sometimes means putting yourself last. And then lastly, if all this ever is just a really great video diary to tell Ruby her story, then that would be amazing too. So I think it makes the most sense to just lay it all out there from the very beginning. But I understand that makes this a very lengthy story, and so it makes sense to me to kind of share it in phases. So I think this first video will go to the very beginning, which is to Ruby's diagnosis. But if you don't know the whole story and you're wondering why, I'm not meaning to tease or dangle or any of that. So I'll just lay it all out there so you understand why you might want to watch another video after this, and maybe you don't. Maybe you get 4 minutes in and you're like, I can't take any more of this lady. That's okay. This isn't personal. So our daughter Ruby was born 8 months ago in July. And in her 8 months of life, she has had a heart catheterization. She has had an episode of cardiogenic shock where we almost lost her in August. And she had open heart surgery in January of this year. and had subsequent complications in the days after surgery that led to cardiac arrest, spending time on ECMO. She suffered a massive right hemispheric stroke, and then also had seizures for 4 days straight after the stroke, and lived to tell it. Seems kind of silly to share it in such like a bare bones way, but God never left our side. He never failed us. And there are times in this story where I have questioned God and still don't know all of his reasons why, and any of his reasons. But at the end of the day, it is our faith in him that we leaned on through all of this. And when you look back on certain parts of this, it is so evident areas that can only be explained by God. And it's just so awesome to be able to share him with you guys through this. So it is a story of worst days of our lives, and how I will never call a day the worst day of my life again, because I know that it can always get worse. And even as I say this, and I know that even still, our story could have been far worse than it is. So yeah, I think it's important to start at the beginning, and that is with the birth of sweet Ruby. So I'm happy to share that with you guys, and I hope that you will stick around.
One look at you, my whole life falls in line. I prayed for you before I called you mine.
Okay, so Ruby was born in July, like I said. I had a fairly uncomplicated pregnancy. We did have some difficulty getting pregnant, which is a story for another day, but ultimately had an uncomplicated pregnancy and a beautiful, beautiful birth. Ruby was born via C-section due to complications in my delivery with Wyatt, which, going back to my story of worst days, if you would have asked me 9 months ago what the worst day of my life was, I would have said it was the day Wyatt was born, because of how scary that day was, which is a story for another day. But up until day of delivery, the biggest concerns for most expecting mothers are for, ease of delivery. And so for me, having a C-section, that was scary to me. With my son, it was emergency or fairly emergent, and so I didn't have time to worry about it and be scared, because it was just what had to happen to save him. But with Ruby, I had all of this time to think about nothing but, having a major surgery. And so I worried about that. And I'm a worrier at heart. You should just know that. If there is a possible opportunity to worry and have anxiety over something, I do. And that's, complicates this story a whole lot. But I worried about that. And then I worried if she would be breathing when she came out, which once again is related to issues we had with Wyatt. When he was not breathing when he was born, and was immediately intubated and sent to the NICU. Unrelated, his was due to, just issues in childbirth, not due to an underlying health condition. And then, the third worry is about breastfeeding. Is she going to latch? Is it going to come easy? And those are the things that fill your brain, and they feel like the hugest hugest worries in your life at the time. And now looking back, which I don't discount those were valid worries for me and valid worries for any mom. It's, no concern is too big or too small in my book. I still worry about the small things too. So Ruby was born. She was beautiful, and she came out lungs blaring, and absolutely perfect. And we were just overjoyed to have her in our life and our family. And everything was great. I was progressing wonderful. Ruby was wonderful. And so even though I had a C-section, we were scheduled to be discharged 2 days after Ruby was born. And so they were kind of preparing us for that. And it was on a Friday, and they were just kind of telling us Friday night, like, what was going to happen, because we were going to be discharged Saturday. So they said that they were going to come in the middle of the night and take Ruby for newborn screening, just generic or, routine screens that they do on all newborn babies before discharge. And she would be gone about 20 or 30 minutes from our room. And so the nurse came in, and she got Ruby, and she was like, get some sleep, even if it's just 30 minutes, because we had not really been sleeping a whole lot yet in her first 2 days of life. And they took her away, and I went to sleep, and I woke up, and I looked at the clock, and I remember thinking that she had been gone for too long, or for longer than I thought. I think it had been like 45 minutes or an hour at this point. And so I dozed back off to sleep. And then shortly after, the nurse came in and was rolling Ruby in, and she said, Mom, everything's okay. She said, but Ruby failed one of her screens. And in this short amount of time, I was having my constant internal dialogue. I thought that it was the screen for bilirubin, and that, we're going to have to stay another day, and she's going to have to go on the light. And, in my brain, in this short amount of time, I was thinking, that's okay. Like, changes our plan a little bit. We were looking forward to getting home, but it's okay. But then the next words that came out of the nurse's mouth were, Ruby failed her screen for congenital heart disease or heart defects. And she said, is there a family history of heart defects? And of course our answer was no history. And so at that point, like, I'm just thinking, it's a mistake, And then the nurse goes on to tell me that they did the test 3 times, that Ruby failed it all 3 times, and that they used more than one machine to do the test on, just to further prove the results. And so she said that on exam, they could hear a slight murmur in Ruby's heart. And at this point, this nurse and then the next nurse that came in also said that it's common. A lot of babies are born with murmurs. They're typically benign, and they clear up on their own. And so she said, what is likely going to happen, we're going to call, the hospital's pediatrician now, but he's likely going to order an echocardiogram just to be overcautious and rule out anything more serious. And so the nurse left, and she came back shortly after, and she said, the doctor does want to order an echocardiogram, but because Ruby has failed the screens, we want to keep her in the NICU for monitoring. And for those of you who don't know kind of where we live, so we live north of Houston, and so we were at a hospital north of Houston, a smaller hospital, and they don't even have an echocardiogram or pediatric. I don't even know if it's pediatric or regular. They don't even have one on site. So they actually have a third-party company come in from Houston to do the echo. And so this was all happening at, by this time, 4 or 5 a.m. And the echo wouldn't be there until later that morning. So when the NICU team for the day got on. The NICU nurse practitioner listened to Ruby and examined Ruby and came and told us that Ruby had a heart defect that was going to require surgery. And I broke down, but I was mad because I was like, why are you saying this? Everybody else is saying it's likely benign and it'll clear up on its own, and you don't think that this is a murmur that'll clear on its own? And she said, no, I don't. And she kind of left, and I felt like, gosh, she's so abrasive, and she jumped to worst case scenario, and how dare she? And because even after that, so this was around 6 a.m., then we got a visit from the attending doctor for the NICU. We got a visit from the pediatrician, multiple other nurses, and all of them were saying, this is, no need to panic. This is, we hear this a lot in babies, and we're doing the echo just to rule anything out. And, when they get here, they're going to do the test, and then the radiologist has to read the test, and then he's going to send it to the cardiologist, who's not even here today. He's just on call. So it may be this afternoon before, we even get the results back. So let's settle in, basically. And I had called my mom. I had texted my siblings. James, my husband, had, I believe, kind of let his mom know what was going on. And so we had some friends that came up to visit us and drop a sweet gift by, because they had planned to come see Ruby. They weren't able to see Ruby because she was in the NICU. And we went on about our discharge. We had a discharge class that we had to go to in order to be discharged, which is silly because we are second-time parents, but whatever. And then we got back to our room, and we were just kind of waiting to hear that the echo was done. And once again, we were kind of just expecting, hey, it's done, Ruby, settle in, you can come see her shortly. But the same nurse practitioner from the NICU came in probably about 20 or 30 minutes after they started the echo. And I think I knew instantly that it was bad news. And she said to me and James that Ruby has multiple defects in her heart. She's going to have surgery. We are talking to Texas Children's Hospital, which, once again, if you're not familiar, it's located in the medical center in downtown Houston. And she said that she kind of focused on just one defect, which we found out in our next visit from the NICU attending about the other defect that they were certain Ruby had. So they could tell from the echocardiogram that Ruby had a heart defect called tetralogy of Fallot, which is basically 4 defects that make up the diagnosis. And to get a little medical on you, so tetralogy of Fallot, the 2 primary parts of the diagnosis are a VSD, a ventricular septal defect, which is a hole between the right and left atrium of the heart that allows oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor blood to mix, which results in just overall poorly oxygenated blood, which is a reason for lower pulse oxygen saturations. But tetralogy of Fallot is typically accompanied with, is accompanied with pulmonary stenosis, which is a narrowing of the pulmonary valve. But in extreme cases like Ruby's, or in more severe cases like Ruby's, it comes with pulmonary atresia, which is basically an absent pulmonary valve in Ruby's case. And so Ruby was receiving no blood flow from her heart to her lungs, in theory. All babies are born with a ductus called the ductus arteriosus that typically closes within 2 and 3 days of life. And so at this time, it was the ductus arteriosus, or the PDA, that was keeping Ruby alive. And so she was placed on a medication called PGE that basically works to keep that ductus open. And so from basically the moment our hospital that we delivered at saw the defect, they called Texas Children's Hospital, and the cardiology team at Texas Children's Hospital began calling all of the shots in Ruby's case. They sent a team to come and pick her up. We were originally supposed to be life-flighted, but in just odd, crazy happenstance, there happened to be a terrible accident on the freeway that day north of where we were. That required multiple life flights, and so there was more air traffic that day than freeway traffic, and so they sent an ambulance. And at this point in our life, this was the like I said, the worst day of our life. Our whole world came crashing down. We were expecting to go home, and instead, hours later, we watched them take our daughter. Like, we saw our daughter leave our room at 4 a.m. The next time we saw her, she was intubated. She was sedated. It was so hard to see her like bubbling at the mouth. All of these things that happen. It was just shock. We just went from like everything's fine and we're about to go home as a family of 4 to what does the next 12 hours look like? Because we didn't yet know whether or not she would be having like emergency surgery. So, we followed the ambulance. Actually, I think we beat the ambulance to Texas Children's. And that's kind of where the rest of our story really starts.
Oh, I can't believe it's true sometimes. Oh, I can't believe it's true. I get to love you. It's the best thing that I'll ever do. I get to love you. It's a promise I'm making to you. Whatever may come.
Definitely unrealistic to think that I can get through these videos without interruptions. So Ruby is awake from her nap. She's still a little sleepy and in a milk coma. So I guess to continue the story, Texas Children's had began calling the shots, and we were transferred there, and we were admitted to a level 4 NICU. And if you have never witnessed such a thing, consider yourself lucky. In every direction you look, there are babies in pods fighting for their life. And you walk and you turn, and there are more babies in more areas, just in every direction you look as far as you can see. And it's heartbreaking. And you try not to look, one, because you're respecting other families' privacy. But it's something that ultimately is inevitable. And just the whole magnitude of that day was huge, because she was immediately triaged by a group of nurses and doctors who were basically checking her stability from the ride, and the placement of all of her lines and the placement of her breathing tube, and kind of reevaluating that, changing medication doses, and getting her just set up. Obviously in the NICU, it's not private, it's open. So we had a very small space to sit with her, just a couple of chairs, and then obviously couldn't stay the night with her, which is just awful. Like, you have this baby and you're already, yeah, just so shaken up that you're finding out that something is wrong with them. And then on top of it, you're finding out that you're going to have to leave her too. And that just seems really, really unbearable at the moment. So the cardiology team at Texas Children's, which, is the #1 cardiology, pediatric cardiology department in the entire country. They wanted to do their own testing to, confirm or deny the diagnosis. And so that first day was basically about just repeat testing. And so they, like, late that night, maybe 9 or 10 o'clock, let us know that, they found what the original hospital had suspected, that their test had confirmed that diagnosis. And so we were told that, when their full team was in, which would likely be Monday, they would, oh, God bless you. Oh, that's you. God bless you. God bless you. Yeah, I know. That their whole team would kind of discuss the case as a whole, and then decide on a course of action. Yeah. And so the two things that they were deciding between were to do a heart catheterization or a surgery, open chest but not open heart at this point. And both of those would be temporary procedures to temporarily provide pulmonary blood flow. And so we found out pretty early on in the week, like Monday or Tuesday, that Ruby was a candidate for the heart catheterization procedure. And I just want to say, it was like I kind of mentioned, like, earth-shattering, because you have no idea that there's anything wrong with your child, and then you find out that they have a fairly serious medical condition that's going to require, like, such huge intervention. And for the most part, what we were told about tetralogy of Fallot is it's one of the more common congenital heart defects, and it's very treatable, but at the end of the day, it's a lifelong condition. Ruby is always going to have to be monitored. There's no cure, so the surgeries correct them, but temporarily. So we kind of always knew that, but basically we were told, like, once she had her full surgery, her full repair, that she could lead a pretty close to normal life and have a fairly good prognosis. And so we really, like, held tight onto that hope. The staff and the nurses and the doctors, just incredible. There wasn't a medical team that didn't walk up to us, and the first thing they would say is, congratulations on your daughter. She's beautiful. And they would all just acknowledge, like, you guys didn't know about this in utero, and then just with heavy eyes and hearts, just acknowledge, like, what we had been through. And they hear every question, they answer it, no matter how silly it may seem to doctors, these questions that these non-medical minded parents have. And if you'll remember, the NICU nurse practitioner from my, just a few minutes ago that I was telling you about, and how much I disliked her in the moment, which now, realizing that she was exactly correct in what she said, we got into the NICU on Sunday morning after spending the night in the Ronald McDonald House at Texas Children's Hospital, and she was there, and I walked up to her, and my eyes instantly filled up with tears, and I gave her a hug, and I don't even know if I said anything. I think I said, you were right, and she said, I know, and she said, I knew when I saw your daughter, I knew that you would end up here, and I knew that you would be in my unit. And to us, like, that was such a God thing. Like, he put this woman in our path that, was, going to give us some terrible news but she was going to kind of be a constant for us. And she was. She became such a huge, resource for us on the days that she was on shift, and really fought for Ruby and helped move some things forward. And so this woman that I, at one point in time, I guess I hated the messenger, or I hated the message, but not the messenger. And like our time in the NICU, it was difficult, but Ruby was, she was such a rock star. She was gaining weight, and she was eating, and she was stable the entire time she was there. She was just, being monitored because of this heart condition. So ultimately, the cardiology team decided that Ruby was a good candidate for the heart catheterization instead of a surgery. And so when she was 10 days old, she had that procedure, which, it sounds like, oh, it's just easy, it's just a cath. Well, it's still risky and scary. They still put her under anesthesia. She required blood transfusion while she was in the procedure. And so, but ultimately it was a success. It didn't, the outcome wasn't exactly what they thought it would be because of the size of Ruby's ductus. So she had stents placed into the ductus that I spoke about previously to kind of temporarily keep it open, to keep providing that pulmonary blood flow. And so her ductus was so large, they ended up having to place 2 stents in there, which in turn was providing a lot of pulmonary blood flow. So we went from having, it was kind of like an overcorrection, and just something that they told us, we would kind of need to monitor. I'm probably running out of time here, but ultimately the procedure was successful. She came out of anesthesia great. She was extubated successfully. And we ended up going home when she was 2 weeks old, and just felt like, okay, we're going to be okay. We're going to have surgery at a later date. But this short little period of time is over. And we just really felt just blessed and grateful, because so many times when we were in the NICU, there were babies even in our same unit that just, I still think about them and their families today, and just wonder, how they're doing. We saw other babies having code events, and just nothing that you ever want to see, and see other parents have to go through. And we just always maintained that we never felt like we belonged there, and that we really felt really, really lucky. And so, you're being a stinker. All right, we will wrap this up for today, and I guess the next video we'll talk about kind of what happened once we got home, as I alluded to. So all of this is happening at the end of July. I kind of alluded to earlier that we almost lost Ruby in August, and that was on August 14th, which was, just 5 days after we got home. But I have clearly run out of time today. I am needed elsewhere, and that is perfect, huh? So thank you for listening and staying along this crazy video this long. I hope you'll stick around for the next video.
Can't believe it's true sometimes. Oh, I can't believe it's true. I get to love you. It's the best thing that I'll ever do. I get to love you. It's a promise I'm making to you. Whatever may come, your heart I will choose. Forever I'm yours, forever I do. I get to love